So I want to start off this video by saying I think that Joel Miller from The Last of Us Part 1 is one of the best written and best developed protagonists in any video game ever made. The way his story goes from a tragic beginning to an even more tragic ending is something that just isn't done in video games and in a lot of movies either. It's very well done what they do with Joel. But the reason why it's so well done is because Joel is a fucking asshole. Now, I'm not saying that because I don't like Joel, as I just said. I think he's a well-written character. But the reason why I think he's a well-written character is because he has major flaws. And his largest flaw is that he is very selfish. From the very beginning of The Last of Us Part 1, Joel is shown to be a very selfish person. Even when it wouldn't take him but 1 second to help someone, he refuses to even take the chance to put himself or his daughter at risk, which is a lot like a lot of other human beings are. A lot of human beings are selfish, which makes Joel very relatable. And Naughty Dog did a great job by showing that while this person does have great characteristics, at the end of the day, he is extremely selfish. It's very much shown in the game that all Joel really cares about is himself, especially after he loses his daughter. He really only cares about himself. And even when he's been hanging out with Tess for years, Tess even has to convince him and herself that he cares about her. So Joel he's an asshole, honestly. Like, he really is. But the largest decision that makes Joel an asshole in the first game was that he pretty much doomed the entire world in order to save Ellie. Now, once again, a lot of people will justify this decision in many different ways, and I'm going to go through the justifications that people give for Joel's decision and why they are wrong, and there is no justification for what he did at all. We're going to start off with the first justification is that if you're a parent, you would never want to watch your child die, and so Joel acted out of impulse because Ellie's his quote-unquote daughter. He wouldn't want to see her die. That's understandable, but we also have to consider that Joel barely spent any time with Ellie, like compared to Marlene, who's her actual guardian. You know, Marlene knew Ellie from the day she was born and was best friends with her mother, while Joel had only known Ellie for at most, if you stretch it, 9 months. And don't get me wrong, 9 months is a great amount of time to get to know someone and bond with them, especially when you're on a life and death mission. But to say that Joel had more justification to decide what should happen to Ellie than her actual fucking guardian is just wrong. So that's the first thing. The second thing that counters that is Ellie literally told him that she would have wanted it. She would have wanted to die, to sacrifice herself to save the rest of the world. And I'm not using the second game here to back up my arguments. I'm only using the first game. In the very first game, Ellie says this.
You know that, right?
What's the other option?
Go back to Tommy's. Be done with this whole damn thing.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
Now, unless you're mentally challenged, you should clearly see that Ellie meant to tell Joel here that I don't give a fuck what happens to me, as long as all of the shit that happened to my friends, everyone who's died, it wasn't for nothing. That's all I care about. So that translates to anyone with a brain that Ellie is willing to do anything to find a cure, including lay her life on the line. This is further supported later on in this same game when Joel lies to her multiple times about what he did. If he truly thought he did right by Ellie, he would have no problem telling her the truth here. But he doesn't, because he knows that it was wrong. He knows that he had wronged her, but he he didn't care, because once again, he is selfish. He doesn't even give her the option to choose whether or not to forgive him. He just tells her, look, you gotta believe me here, buddy. I fucking killed no one for you, and you know, everything's, the Fireflies suck, and you know, you're good. Like, there's no cure. Haha. I took you out while you still had your hospital clothes on. That's kind of weird, huh? Well, anyway, let's go back to Tommy's now. And Ellie, being the kind soul that she is, and the fact that she just couldn't believe that Joel would do something like this to her, decides to believe him, okay? So those are huge red flags as to why Joel is an asshole for the decision that he made. But not only that, we have even more to support why Joel is an asshole. Joel literally kills, no, not just spares, not just harms, kills, brutally murders the woman that he knows is extremely important to Ellie. Now let's run it back. Joel spent 9 months at most with Ellie. How is he justified in murdering the closest thing she has to a mother and then lying about it to her? Where's the justification for that? Can you please tell me how this makes him a good person? Can someone let me know, please? Now, the next rebuttal, which is just nonsense, is that, well, the Fireflies didn't know if there would be a cure. They didn't know for sure if a cure would be done. Okay, fair enough. They didn't know for sure. Nobody did. It's the first time anyone's ever done this, but this is a fictional universe. You can't just take all of our logic from the real world and put it into this game and say, oh, they would have to do more tests and The reason why the decision had to be made at the time it had to be made was because it had to give Joel the opportunity to lie to Ellie. Ellie had to be unconscious for this story beat to take place. So you can say they should have waited for Ellie to wake up and then ask her if she'd want to do it, but that doesn't help the story, for one, and for two, that doesn't make logical sense here. If you know that you're gonna have to kill this girl, you're gonna want to do it while she's asleep, so she doesn't even have a fucking option to say no. Second of all, her guardian signed off on it. And once again, I know they give that more context in the second game, but she does it in the first game. She signs off on it. She is her guardian, like it or not, and she signed off on it. So it's not like they're just killing this girl with no justification. I could see if Marlene wasn't Ellie's guardian, but she is. So she has more of a right to decide what happens to Ellie than Joel does, and Ellie has more right than both of them, and she would have wanted it too. So what the fuck? How is Joel justified again? Can someone please explain to me how Joel was justified in what he did here? Anybody? Oh, because he lost Sarah. That's right. So let me get this straight. When you lose a daughter, that gives you the right to murder your next daughter's mother if she disagrees on what you should do with her life. Does that make sense to you? Does that sound logical to you? Does that sound like a good argument? No, it sounds insane, and that's what people are doing with Joel. It's like these people haven't even looked at the cutscenes of this game ever since they fucking touched it the first time 7 years ago, and they don't even consider all of the facts of the story. They don't even remember that Joel killed Marlene. Like, people don't even remember that Joel murdered her because he was too selfish to let Ellie go. Now, I want to go back and say, yes, I do completely understand why Joel did what he did. A character doing a bad thing does not necessarily mean that the story is bad or that the character themselves are bad. All that's required for a good story is for us to understand why the character did what they did and why they made the decisions that they made. And undoubtedly so, we completely understand why Joel did what he did. That's not in question. What should not be in question, but is in question for some reason, is whether or not he was right. And he clearly was fucking not right.
You keep finding something to fight for. Now, I know that's not what you want to hear right now.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Liar!